All right, we're live. It is Thursday. It's Thursday. That is the day of the week. It's the 4th of December, the first week of December that we are doing this. And this is it. We're in the home stretch. I hope you enjoyed the odd faces I was making at the beginning. I'm assuming those all went through. Yeah, what we have here in the description, I did not type up a very lengthy explanation of everything tonight. We just have, at this point in time, the end of the November releases. Obviously, tomorrow being the first Friday of December means that tomorrow will be kind of the day when most of the first batch of December releases comes out. And I am hoping, I keep saying this week after week, but I'm really hoping that the release schedule slows down a little bit in December. I think it will at some point in time. However, I have already seen a number of, well, 2 or 3 fairly large releases slated for release tomorrow. So we'll have to wait and see. As it stands, this evening we have 12 releases. I'm going to say, if you tuned in for the news yesterday, then you probably heard me chattering about this. I honestly thought it was going to be much less. Last Friday was a very, very large music drop, just in terms of the number of kind of like big releases. Some of them big in the sense of people have been waiting for years for these albums to come out, and we're going to be talking about that one in particular. Big in the sense of an album from a very popular Russian artist who put out an album that's an hour and a half long with 30 tracks and is incredibly dense. Big in the sense of young new faces, or relatively new faces in the game, who are coming back. Kind of, these are sophomore or their third releases, and people are excited about it. So, and then I'm just going to be flat out. OG Buddha had a release for any rap heads that might be tuning in. OG Buddha had a release last week that I started to listen to, and I do plan on getting back to it. I really do plan on getting back to it. But it was just too much with everything else, and I'm not a huge Buddha fan. So that said, I still managed to squeeze in a few last releases. Some, as is always the case, I have albums that I've listened to here or there, and then eventually I just forget about them, and then when I need to find a few albums to go on, it's just like, oh yeah, there was an album I was listening to. But as it stands, we have 12. We are actually going to open up with pop and indie this week, which is nice because pop and indie music dominated October, and it feels like the start of November. So to have still like some nice releases here, all things considered, but to have them be starting us out here is a little bit nicer. Then we're going to move on to rock and metal. We actually have some interesting things happening in rock and metal this week. Then beyond that, we are going to have, in the links in the description below, I just have it as other. You could maybe, it's not really electronic, it's just its own other category. It could probably be lumped into pop and indie. It could maybe be electronic. We'll talk about it. And we're actually going to end with rap this week because, like I said, it was just kind of a very big, I didn't mention it earlier, I didn't allude to a genre, but most of those big albums released on the final Friday of November, most of those were rap albums. So we're going to be ending with that. So without any further ado, let me go ahead. I feel like I'm really short. Why is that? Maybe it's just my camera's weird today. Okay, whatever. I guess it's because when it's just me in the screen, I've got the camera cropped in a little bit. And then when I drop down to the corner, then it's just me wildly gesticulating like a tiny little man. I have more room to do so. Anyway, we are starting with pop and indie, as I said. Now, the first album that we are going to be looking at is by an artist. I think it's pronounced Sertzelev or Sertzelev. Actually not. I'm a little unclear on that. But the album is Reyv одиноких сердец. God damn it. Родительный падеж is kind of a bitch when you think about it. Reyv одиноких сердец, which is like Lonely Hearts Club, or it's nuts. It's the rave of lonely hearts is how it translates into English. Sertzelev, maybe is how you pronounce it. Doesn't matter. Let's just talk about the music. This is evidently the work of an individual who's a bit like an old head on the post-punk scene here in Russia. The talk around the album all hinged upon that. But for me, and I'm assuming everyone who's watching this, what's more important with the music that I talk about here is the album, is the sound, the vibe, the energy of what we're getting here. And I am going to admit, when I first listened to this, I was a little put off by it. Mainly because I didn't understand what exactly the sound was trying to do. But it's a marriage of that post-punk with its laconic, very laid-back and apathetic sounding vocals. And lyrically, it is all centered on the loneliness of post-Soviet, modern Russian, kind of awkward, geeky, strange people in society. Instrumental music-wise, though, it's married together with synth pop instrumentals. And it actually kind of fits. Like these two sounds, which should kind of conflict, do end up working together once you wrap your head around the sound a little bit. Now, this isn't to say this is something that I would necessarily come back to, but I do get, I think, the audience this is aimed at. It would mainly be kind of for people a little bit older than me, people a little bit younger than me, but in that general age window. And I do appreciate the experimental idea of the sound here a little bit. It is, in some ways, too, it reminded me quite a bit of the sound of Russian groups like Diskoteka Avaria, and that wave of Russian music from about 25 years ago, which kind of feels, there's a nostalgia to it now, but it also feels a little bit absurd, kind of cheap sounding even. Let's just get into it. Why is nothing playing? What is this? What is going on? Okay, hold up. Let's, that is pretty fantastic. Obviously, Roskomnadzor, Russian government, absolutely love dicking down the internet and all things connected to it, and they have been going mad hard at it recently. So technical difficulties are just the long, dirty shaft of the Kremlin and all of the various organs connected to it, figuratively and literally. All right, I think we're back now. Yeah, okay. It should be working. Okay, there we go. Really over-the-top synth pop. And the post-punk vocals. Yeah, I know, I did. It started for a second, but... I feel like there were definitely groups doing this sound in the 1980s too. I just don't have the depth, the encyclopedic knowledge of that specific era of like US and even Western Europe groups, European groups to really pinpoint it. So there are the upbeat ones. Wait, hold up. I want to find ones a little bit more. I think this is also. It's a little bit more subdued though, at least vocally. It's something that I had understood for a long time. I think this is the one that's maybe a little. I'm just. Yeah, this is a little bit more dialed back. It's wild, just how deeply ingrained post-punk is in the modern Russian music scene, and it's something that I had realized prior to the start of this year, but I didn't actually realize like the actual extremes of it, which is kind of feels like one of those things worth exploring as its own topic, the historic and cultural reasons for that, perhaps. So I think you get the idea there, right? It is probably a sound that it might be a sound that you've encountered before. It is probably a sound that has been done by other groups, like I said, in the 80s, most likely. But after hearing so many post-punk variations over the course of the year, this one did stick out a little bit. And it has definitely, at least eye-catching, maybe not for the best reasons, album art. So there's always something for that too. I do think I do love pointing it out. So that is the album by the artist Sertzelev, probably Sertzelev is probably where the stress mark is. And I actually want to get the stress mark right for the album. Serdzec. Yeah, I'm such an idiot. I've just been, sometimes the name of the album is Rejv одиноких сердец. I realistically should have known that, but anyway, not a bad start. Definitely something a little different. Moving on, we have the album 2170 by the artist Katya Miltey, or Miltei. Real simple, real straight to the point, stylish indie pop. Explores a few different sounds over the course of the short runtime that it has, but it is mainly slick, synthy radio pop. Although it does feel not like it's mass-produced type of radio indie. It does feel it has more of an indie edge to it, especially in the back half where the track gets a little bit more darker and more focused on like emotional things and vulnerabilities, at least lyrics-wise. But the first half is definitely like just very, very slick and very catchy, which is not a bad thing. Katya's an artist too that I have seen pop up in like new artists. I noticed her in like Yandex Music Shuffle or whatever last year. I've seen her pop up and featured on other tracks with their artists. So I don't think this is her first big work, but first one I'm sitting down with. Right? It's got something to it here. that's actually the one I did not want to jump to. It is, that's like the most vulnerable sounding one, but... Remember which one of the guests featured here is this. It's happening again. Okay, there it is. This is that what I was talking about, the a little bit darker, a little bit more subdued, but not fully. It's still very much like a. It's supposed to be a... Katya Miltei described it as kind of like 4 different characters. There's only 8 tracks, so that feels a little bit excessive, but it does, I think, kind of supposed to encapsulate the different characters over an entire evening, for example. So I'll leave it there. I think you get the sound. It's pretty much like that. It's basically an EP, even though it's an album according to the thing here. But that is the release 2170 by the artist Katya Miltei. Very slick, synthy, radio indie pop, if you will. And then the final release, АИГЕЛ, with the album ЧЕЛОВЕК. Now, this is a group we saw back in the first quarter, and I thought that back in the first quarter, they basically had put out probably the best electropop album for that time. They're back again, and I honestly thought we were going to have like them representing the electronic music category, but I do feel like this is more of a pop indie release this time around, although there are a lot of those electropop elements in it, especially kind of in the first 3, maybe 4 songs. The reason for that is just there's a lot more variety across the tracks. There's one that's a very vulnerable acoustic style track. There are tracks here that are very much just sort of indie pop. This time everything is in Russian. On their last release, they had a track in German, a track in English, I think one in Tatar. Here they are back to just Russian. And when they do, there's a lot more of what I would consider their like old sound. This is a group that got famous mainly because one of their songs was featured in a Slovo Patsana, which was a show here that kind of blew up at the start of 2022, I want to say. It's been a few years. And when the show got super popular, the song that was used kind of throughout the show was, I can't remember the name of it. It was one of their tracks. And so I think a lot of people discovered the group. Then they've actually been featured in a number of soundtracks too, just smaller, I think a lot, not necessarily indie shows, but things that are a little bit under the radar for most people. But their music has often had this dark, up-tempo electro feel to it. you'll hear it on the second track. That's the one where I think it sounds the most like that. And that is the sound that made them kind of the underground stars, if you will. But that they are. But I'll give you a taste of like the first 3 tracks. Because I think... album artwork's a little undercooked. I mean, I get what they're going for. ЧЕЛОВЕК means person or human, and this is supposed to be like a captcha, but
Все под контролем, контроль это важно. Ну, не плачь, умирать не страшно. Страшно ни в чем не найти покоя. Никогда ни в чем не найти покоя.
this sound is the one that I'm is kind of getting to. It's up tempo. It's definitely a little. But it's definitely dark, and it's kind of got that like edgier electro sound to it. The second track, realistically, the first 3 tracks are the standout on this album. I'm just going to say that, right? Like they're the ones that I think most people are going to come back to. That's not to say that as you get further into the album that they get worse. There are still plenty of better tracks later on. I just think that it's quite front-loaded in that regard. If you're familiar with, and I mentioned them too, I don't remember when earlier this year, there was a group Ice Peak too. They also had a sound that was similar in its, different but similar. Waiting for the chorus specifically here. This is kind of it right here. I don't know what artists in the West have sound similar to this. I know they exist. Yeah, and if anybody else can recall, if any names come to mind, let me know, because it's something that I just haven't been able to put together in my upstairs, at least. And then we have, this is more of a slow burn, but once it gets into it, let it go a little bit here, and then we're going to jump towards the end because it kind of like.
Взглядом мне в глаза, человеку больно, больно, человеку в них искать нечего, и глазам моим от взгляда человечего больно, больно.
So very dramatic, and then
больно, 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 взгляда.
Goes into this sort of electronic breakdown, break beats, right? I always think of Year Zero by 9 Inch Nails when I hear this, but I know there are other, probably much better known reference points. Year Zero by 9 Inch Nails. So yeah, I think those 3 songs are going to be, like, for most people, what stick from this album, and that's fair. But there are these tracks like Ложноножки, which are, they kind of just feel like upbeat and goofy, which is kind of what it is. And it feels thematically dissonant from what comes before it. But you come back around to it and it, like, I don't know, the second time it doesn't, it just feels more like it's where it's supposed to be. Like, it feels more front-loaded, but that's just because the overall sound shifts as you move through it, right? You get to the next one, Комонь, which is also melancholic, down-tempo. We got the darker thing, too. Those strings in the background as well, too. So. I don't think this is the album that most people were hoping for or even expecting. I'll be honest, I didn't know АИГЕЛ was putting out another album, I guess, yeah. And so I think some people might be a bit disappointed by this, which is fair. It does not hit the exact same sound that people maybe were hoping to get from the group again. In the same way that earlier in the year with Livansky, that her release was quite a bit different, a little bit more experimental and in a different direction from her previous releases. I think ЧЕЛОВЕК here by АИГЕЛ is a little bit different, quite different from the release that they put out at the start of the year, and relatively different from the sound that I think most people know them for, especially who are familiar with them from soundtracks like Slova Patsana. But I think this is one of those albums too that overall, if you do sit down with it and you give it a few listens, which is only 26 minutes long, it's not difficult to listen to it a few times. If you have something to go on, just repeat all and let it play out. And I think if you give it that time and allow it to sink in, then you'll find that it's quite a nice album. I wouldn't say it's my favorite work by them, but it's also not bad. So it's not a resounding seal of approval, but yeah, that is the album ЧЕЛОВЕК by the artist АИГЕЛ. And with that, we move on to rock and metal. And we're going to open up with an EP here. Okay, let's see if I can get this. Сколько, успели, пока, папа, забрал, комп. And that's the name of the EP. And the artist is Макарони Фибоначчi. I thought it was Fibonacci in English, but maybe I've always been mispronouncing it. Макарони Фибоначчи. Yeah, the Fibonacci sequence. Yeah, it is. Okay. In the last month, I feel like I've just been getting slammed with just great, massive pop and indie and rap and hip hop releases since the start of October, or like the second week of October, basically through November. Just been boom, 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 pop and indie and rap and hip hop. So this EP by a group out of Tyumen was a bit of a breath of fresh air. It's an interesting sound. It's Midwest emo, but then the noodling of the guitars that you would get with Midwest emo just shifts over into these full-on math rock labyrinths. And it's a mix of really energetic and aggressive sections that then act as this nice counterbalance to the melancholic and emotional side of Midwest emo. It's a very short EP. It's only 10 minutes, but I really enjoyed this. The first track just throws you into it. I think it's a perfect place to start. I do really appreciate the album artwork here too. Like, I hope it's hand drawn. I hope it's not some AI stuff. Could be, but right? We started out with the Midwest emo sound a little bit. Now we're in math rock territory. And this isn't an instrumental piece. There are lyrics, there is singing and whatnot here, but it's not the main focus, as you probably could have guessed. Just jumped over all of it. It's got that frenetic, almost borderline hysterical instruments, and then the vocalist. It's maybe not the best comparison, but at the drive-in, there's a little bit of that energy in there too. Just a slightly more emo version of At the Drive-In. Could be. I'm actually interested which Japanese rock bands were you listening to as a teenager. I was never really big into Japanese rock, but there definitely were some groups. Japanese metal, I guess, more, but regardless. I don't know. I'm not like a diehard fan of math rock or even Midwest emo. I like both of them in doses, right? It's one of those things where it's, for me, I have a musical diet, right? I have certain staples that I just come back to and I can consume pretty much at any time. And then, just like it is with your regular diet, every once in a while, you're just like, God damn it, I want a little bit of, like, I want an avocado or something, right? Like maybe, just like, shit, I need an avocado. AKFG sounds familiar, but, and that's kind of how this is, right? It's like every once in a while, I want something that's got a little bit of that noodly stuff going on, that chaotic energy where it feels like things are just sort of, everybody's doing their own thing. And to take the Midwest emo and the math rock and put it together, I'm sure it's been done before, but it was just such a nice thing to discover. And I do feel like these, I'm just going to assume they're all guys out of Tumyen. This is their first release. I do hope they keep it up. And kind of sounded like Jack White. That's interesting. I'll have to, I mean, I guess, also, I do want to shout out Subotne Sumo. This is actually a group that I featured their EP back in like August or September. And I really enjoyed their EP back at the time. That's a Midwest emo style group too, out of Tumyen. And they feature on this release as well too. So shout out to them as well. They actually sent a message on the live stream. So if they're watching this again too, like, good to see them still being active. So yeah, sounds like Tumyen has a pretty active math rock, Midwest emo or emo type scene going on, and it's got some good energy there. So I hope to hear more from this group, Maccaroni Fibonacci, and Subotne Sumo as well. But yeah, the EP is "Сколько, успели, пока, папа, забрал комп." And it has such a Midwest emo title, which is basically however much we managed before Dad took the computer. It's just like such a Midwest emo type thing. So yeah, really fun, really short release. Another short release, but kind of on the opposite end of the rock and metal spectrum. Here we have NEORHYTHM with the EP "BEZUMIYA." And I will admit too, right? Like I said, there's been a lot of pop and indie and hip hop. Also, the album artwork here, I have to give a big shout out to it, but it's actually the work of a painter from the 18th century or the 18th or 19th century, an English painter. So yeah, this is an actual work of art. So that's part of the reason they made a few changes to it. Yes, as I was saying though, been a lot of pop and indie, a lot of rap and hip hop, not a lot of rock and metal. And that is, in my musical diet, it tends to be one of the key components. And so because it's been a bit of a dry period for really good metal, what I mean by that are albums, releases that when it first gets going, it just hooks you and keeps you engaged until the end. And that's important for any release, right? And that's like, I talk about a lot of music here, but the vast majority of it is not that. It's not stuff that sort of just grabs your attention. Like the last release, I think is fair. It's short, it grabs you, it sucks you in. This one is also this, but it's on the heavier end of things. This is like melodic, groovy death metal. That's basically how the group described it, or how I saw them described over and over again. There are moments on this called to mind the Dillinger Escape Plan, especially the first track. Once we get into it, if you're familiar with the Dillinger Escape Plan, you should hear it immediately. There are also moments, for example, just the beginning of the second track, which I think Lamb of God, which is what was coming to mind. So two very different things going on there. But then there are even moments on these tracks, for example, on the second track here, with the clean vocals and the canoodlings of the guitar that feel borderline power metal. So there's a lot going on. The lyrics, there's some sort of idea here. It's got Greek mythology, hence the painting, which is a reference to Dionysus. That's how you say that, right? Dionysus. I didn't bother to dig into the whole story or mythology, because if the music's good enough by itself, then that's cool. It's nice when there are artists who really come up with these huge things by themselves, but oftentimes that can just be a way to make up for something that is maybe overwrought or undercooked, right? But here, it's neither of those things. This is not too pretentious, and it's not like it needed more time to be perfected. This was it. This is also a group that, out of St. Petersburg, if I'm not mistaken, that has quite a few releases under their belt, so I'm surprised I haven't run into them before. I think I've maybe seen their name, but yeah, let me just get into it. All right, think Dillinger Escape Plan. I mean, it is definitely like sort of groovy death metal, but there's something about that just like Dillinger. First track's good. This just feels like Lamb of God. It's that the double bass is what it is, and the riffing on top of it, but this is the one where we get into the clean singing. I'm gonna jump ahead to that. It sounds like you should disassociate while walking through Gorky Park. Yeah. Hold on, where are the cleans? Oh, they're here. Oh, come on. I think it's... No, it just still feels like... I swear to God, it's in the second track. I feel like I'm hallucinating. I feel like I'm disassociating as well right now. Oh, you can walk through Gorky Park in the winter to this. Oh no, I guess they have the ice rink up already, probably, so... Feels like that sort of iron, not power metal, but like almost iron metal, Iron Maiden era style. So yeah, very good short little metal EP from a group that has been, they've got quite a few releases, like I said, under their belt. When you look at their albums, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or no, I guess technically 4. This is a re-release, and that's an instrumental version. But yes, that is the EP BEZUMIYA, which is like Madnesses, by the group NEORHYTHM. And we're going from hard to probably what for some people will be harder. This is the group Beatdown Heroes with probably the longest album title I've seen in a while. This is Ragnarёк, песни добре, справедливости и перерождении. Ragnarók, songs about kindness, justice, and rebirth. And if you couldn't tell already from a title, songs about kindness, justice, and rebirth, this is metallic hardcore. This is the sort of motivational hardcore. So like, we're gonna like screw drugs and like we're gonna beat each other up, but like we're gonna be like awesome people for it. I don't know. It's just a slab of hardcore, metalcore, beat down type of music, and it's the description I have here is it's as thick as the guys making it. If you go and find pictures of Beatdown Heroes, I guess they have one right here. This does not do them justice. The pictures they have on Katya, this must be an old photo or something. Very thick individuals, not fat necessarily, but just like big, which is fine. It's 17 tracks. It's 50 minutes long. High energy, very intense throughout the whole thing. I would say the only downside is that maybe for even like somebody like me who does tend to enjoy this genre, I'm not like a die-hard hardcore. I'm not a hardcore fan, but I do like it. It does feel like some of these tracks are a little less memorable. This is often the case. Like maybe they could have cut a few of them down. But it's not the worst complaint to have. And by and large, it's fair all the way throughout. So, oh God, it's been a while since, let's see, which one? That's where we get like a little bit more of the metalcore end of things, the more melodic side of it. But there's also plenty of that sort of beat down style. One more, I think you get the idea for the most part. Oh yeah, I mean, the lyrics, yeah. Yeah, lyrically it is kind of its own thing. It might be a little hit or miss for some people. Kind of like the 12th track here too. Lyrically, it's sort of like, it's kind of political, but it's also just like fuck politics in its own little way. I was trying to figure out Bonni или Shavki, like how, but it's very much like anti-far left, anti-far right, sort of. Ебашь, пока молодой is also really, really straight to the point, right? You get the idea. It's that sort of hardcore, metalcore, beatdown, however you want to describe it. If you're familiar with the genre, you have your own associations with it. If you don't listen to the genre, then you don't really care. That is the group Beatdown Heroes. That is the album, say it with me now, Ragnarёк, песни добре, справедливости, перерождения. Oh yeah, I don't have a problem with the political messaging that they have on that. It's just it's one of those where it does feel at times lyrically like it's kind of all over. It feels like it jumps around a lot lyrically. It was just one of those things where after I hadn't really paid much attention to the lyrics of that specific track. I was kind of jumping around. And I had just finished listening to Ебашь, пока молодой, and then they're having this like sort of political rally. I mean, I get it; it's hardcore. That's like their whole motivation with a lot of those groups, and the movement in general is let's put our differences aside and like band together and like work to build. I get it. It's just like sometimes the messaging strikes me. It's unexpected in some situations. So yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a fine album if you're into that type of thing. But we have one more rock and metal release, and this is from the group Splosh, and the album is Перевал, which means pass, like a mountain pass. I actually don't know what Splosh means. I probably should have looked that up. I feel like it's one of those words I have never seen before. Oh, of course I have. It's an adverb. It means everywhere, continuous. It's splosh, like sploshnoi. I guess it's more of a literary term, though. It's not one of those things that I typically hear people say, or I don't see it used very much on the internet. And I suppose that's the reason it didn't immediately stick to me. Yeah, везде, everywhere, splosh. Huh. Interesting. Anyway, sort of brief Russian language moment aside, this is Screamo, right? I'm just going to throw that out there. And Screamo, if you're not familiar, is screaming emo, effectively. It's not a genre that I ever really got, per se, mainly because the vocals. The vocals usually were a little bit too grating for me. And so I never really stuck around when listening to the music for too long. Here, this definitely is Screamo, but it's musically in the non-vocal end of things, and this is where like it first hooked me. It's a lot of post-metal, post-rock, that type of energy going on, even some alt-rock style moments. So just instrumentally, there's some really good stuff going on here. And although the vocals are still that kind of like strained screaming, it's more mature, and that's mainly because this is a debut release from a group out of Moscow, but when I was doing a little bit of reading about it, I discovered that it is composed of musicians who have been on the scene for a while. These guys, I think, are like in their 40s now, so they're not that sort of, just out of high school teenager who is screeching his vocals. These are people who are able to do it well, I guess. And even though Screamo isn't necessarily my sound, I saw a lot of discussion about this, again, in music communities online that discuss metal, and I don't think there's a lot of Screamo releases over the course of the year, and so this was, for a lot of people, they're like, yeah, this is album of the year for me. And I do think, even as somebody who's not a fan, of the sub genre, whatever you want to call it, I do think that this is still a solid release, and I think there's something here if you're into rock and metal. Vocals have never been like thing I enjoy in screamo, but yeah, that little guitar lick right there is pretty tasty. Simple, but and maybe it's because these guys are a little bit older and they've played in other bands. Yeah, Splash. Yeah. It's possible that because they have experience in the music scene for a while, it feels like the vocals are packed into the mix. Like they're not bumped super far up into it, so they don't immediately like overwhelm you. На дороге непрерывная линия, сплошная полоса. Is that a line from something? Oh, okay. The thing is, this is, like I said, this is very much a screamo album, but if I had dug around and read a little bit about it, I probably, I would have had this feeling that it wasn't quite whatever genre I had described it as, but it doesn't feel like the traditional screamo that I'm used to. Maybe that's also just because I'm not a huge fan, like I said, of the genre, but it just feels a lot kind of like just traditional metal. And honestly, I love the album artwork. I think it's fantastic. The color, the way that the font kind of not fades into it, but is also not super. Just like it's very well put together. Yeah, this is a good album, all things considered. If you like metal, even if you're not a screamo fan. All right, I'm gonna stop it there. Yeah, it is. It's not a very long one either, so it is also one that's easy to give it a whirl. So yes, that is the album Pereval, that is the group Sploosh. And this is actually one that came out a few weeks ago, and I actually wanted to talk about last week, but I didn't get around to it. So it's getting a little bit more of a highlight this week than it maybe would have last week. So really good, and that is going to wrap things up for rock and metal for us. So for everyone who's been biding their time patiently, we're moving on. And we're moving on to what I have in the other category. This is a release that I, like I said, could have been pop and indie, could have been electronic. It is technically a folk release, but it also this is just such a weird mix of everything, but you'll get it in a second. So far this year, there have been just a lot of releases of mixing folk with other different modern genres. But I think this might be, I feel like when it comes to the end of the year, I'm just going to have like, again, another little subcategory when looking at albums of sort of folk adjacent, right? Sort of folk plus something. This might be the most interesting end result, or one of. Someone described it as IFM. So IDM is intelligent dance music, and they're like, this is IFM, intelligent folk music, which I think is dumb, but I think the reason that they focus on that is because there are a lot of electronic elements in this. Like I said, it could have been electronic, but it's just not there enough. To me, this is a lot more folk meets jazz, which sounds kind of odd, but hear me out. That's partly due to the inclusion of the saxophone, and it is pretty much on every single track, but there's just this very sort of free form attitude to the music. Songs are traditional ones, and they are curated from across the country. There's songs from Altai, Tatarstan, Komi, even Belgorodskaya Oblast, which I don't know why they had to specifically mention Belgorodskaya Oblast. Maybe there is something that only comes from there, but sure, whatever. But you have these traditional songs, but then there are these weird solos, either on guitar or saxophone or whatever else it might happen to be. Bridges, these kind of odd musical shakedowns. I don't know how best to describe it. It feels like something that you would find in a pop jazz album, maybe like the Skywalker album by the Jazz House Trio, or there was Wandering was one from a few weeks ago too, and I cannot remember the name of the group there too, where it's kind of pop, but it's also jazz. This is that basic formula, with folk basically being the key element to all of that. Now, there is a generous use of electronics, both as backing instruments and as ambiance to fill the space on tracks that are more reliant on the vocalists. But it is just a very nice, very organic mixing of somewhat parallel genres, in the sense that, not that they're all that closely related, but parallel in the sense of like folk and jazz, and even some electronic genres are just really kind of niche genres. So be like, let's just throw all of them together. This is the group Komonь, and the album is the Lесу. We're actually going to start with the title track, because I think that's probably one of the better ones to get us into it. Got the saxophone. Pay attention to the instruments, right? Like we have the folk vocals, and we have like the electronics kind of buried way down in the mix, and then we have these playful jazzy instruments right in the middle, and like all of these things are moving parallel but together with each other the same. Like this could just be like a sort of a pop jazz type album, right? I know the term's not pop jazz, it's what's the name of it? I don't know, whatever. You get what I'm talking about. Like, if you missed the folk singing at the beginning, and the fact that I'm guessing musically this is still based on like a traditional rhythm and song, you would be mistaken for thinking this is folk or jazz. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, I'm sure there's a lot of kind of fun ideas you could, this is, the thing with this music too is because it touches on kind of, as I said, three parallel sounds, the folk, the jazz, and the electronic end of things. There are a lot of, at least with imagery, yeah, kind of like doing, you could do a video too where it wouldn't have to, if it almost, you know how when they sometimes shoot music videos and it has that stop motion, I feel like there's a Tool video, I cannot think of it right now, where there's like a little character moving and it's basically animation, stop motion animation, but the guy kind of walking like it's some old Soviet cartoon. Very fun. I don't know, it'd be interesting to the Westerners out there watching. I've specifically the video idea. I don't know. You'd have to ask him. I think musically. I think musically, Russian folk music just fits into that sort of ethnic music niche, and which is fair because I think obviously some of these folk songs feel a little bit more familiar to people in, like, say, the European half of Russia, but if you're getting songs from the Komi Republic or the Altai region, then even for somebody who has lived in Moscow or Petersburg or Sochi or Krasnodar, doesn't matter, those are also tracks that to them are going to be exotic sounding to some degree, because like those are from regions that are a little further off. And anyway, it's a really nice album. It's one that I was not expecting. I guess I don't know what I was expecting. I just saw people discuss it multiple times. I was like, you know, what the hell? That's kind of how it goes. If I see albums mentioned on different channels and different communities, there's got to be something there to it. So, and I was not disappointed. I think this is a nice surprise of an album for me, and just something different, which is always good to have. So that is the group Komon. I think I'm assuming, yeah. And the album is lesу. Or, I don't actually, lesу? Like from out of the forest. I think if you stood outside of Walmart playing this and got reactions from people, I think it would be like just any ethnic music. Some people would be digging it. This is definitely, because it has the electronic and the jazz elements in there, it definitely is more pop. Like it's a lot easier for mass consumption, which is obviously why they did it this way. So I do think it's probably like it would be with a lot of music, where some people would do the like screwed up face of what is this? Other people would probably kind of be like, yeah, I'm digging this. And then there would probably like some old people who are just like, that's really nice, and I'm gonna go get my whatever I came here for. But anyway, moving on to the final category. I lost my train of thought. It's getting late. Rap and hip hop. We've reached the tab limit. So, okay. We're starting out with the album 21 by the artist 21 To Hug, which I'm assuming is supposed to be like to hug. We actually saw To Hug, Thug, but I don't know. I'm just going to call him To Hug because that's how I'm reading it. We saw To Hug earlier this year, and this is not reinventing the wheel, which is a slightly longer offering from this young rapper. He's now turning 21, I guess, so it's like kind of a birthday release for him. He's out of Samara. It's just classic Russian trap sound, a lot of the hi-hat claps, the punchy bass, velvety strings, and just a lot of like classic sounding bars. Just like a nice kind of...
Кожаное кресло, будто мне уже за 40, но я начинал с низов, у меня не было кроссовок. Почему она на мой друг и мой наркотик? Я не боюсь амбалов, я боюсь...
The album cover is also a reference to a Tupac album. So, if I'm not mistaken.
Хотя старший брат не верил, говорил, что рэп хуёвый. Мама, ты помнишь, я воровал телефоны, как тебя вызвали в школу и звонил наш участковый. Юные ошибки, не могло быть по-другому. Я вырос пацаном, мам с огромной мечтой. Скромная одежда, запахом парфюма старшего брата. Пару сотен на кармане ради дешевого алка. Руки, что пропахли дымом табака.
Yeah, if you search on Amazon for the Best of Tupac Part 1, Thug, you'll see a very similar image to this album artwork. It's a bit of an homage.
Я горел, как тысячи ярких огней. Я терял и сам был ногами в дерьме. Я хотел менять, но не терпеть. Я не сдался, смотри, где я теперь. Но я тусовался во дворе. Дым от сигарет касался моих легких, сука, в 7 лет. Я слушал рэпак на... 2-5 вниз, я плохой пример, я в 8 классе курю каннабис. Читаю рэп, толпа кричит, чтобы вышел на бис. Я здоровый белый, у меня аллергия на крыс. Неважно, твоя тачка, гелик или матис. Важно, что там за тобой стоит или ты не стоишь. Мой город Питер, не мечтаю уехать в Париж. Что ты там не сделаешь, пацанчик, ты лихо пиздишь. Окей, я все тот же на тех же улицах. 812 самая лучшая музыка. Боксерские перчатки в сумке, мы тренируемся. А после этого в Магдате с типами тусуемся. Моя женщина катается в новом кузове. А главный распиздяет школу без светлого будущего. Каждый белый...
So yeah, again, nothing all that new or original, but yeah. To Hug is consistent. Again, there was an EP a few months ago that I highlighted. I think it had like 4 tracks on it. Get something a little bit longer here. But yeah. Yeah, it's that sort of like classic rap sound. Like I said, he's not attempting to reinvent the wheel. He's checking all of the boxes that we expect him to. But I mean, he's also doing, like, he's got a song about becoming the father or something like that, falling in love. So it's not all like the sort of street life type stuff. And it just, the production's good too. So that is the album 21 by 2 Hug. If you're looking for something a little bit classic, kind of safe. It's a safe listen in the sense that, I don't know, it's just good. Up next, though, we have something a little bit more spurious, a little bit more, something that some people might not be a big fan of. I honestly almost turned this off when I first listened to it, but I decided to give it, because Heronwater, with his 1,000 bars, yeah, this is the new glitched out school of rap where kind of hyper pop and hyper distortion are the order of business. Like I said, that first track, when I was listening to it the first time, I was just like, oh God, I don't know if because I've listened to so many albums from like young artists, where it's just distortion and like really bad rapping. And you can have distortion, but it has to have good rapping. I know Fortuna 812, if I'm remembering correctly, and Tony Prince, some of the people who do the archive core sound, I have kind of enjoyed that. Not all of it, obviously, but if it's done well, it can be really enjoyable. But the first track here with the lyrics and the production is just like, oh, okay, I'm in for it. But I sat down because there was a lot of excitement, a lot of hype around this album before it was released, at least in a number of the communities that I follow on Vkontakte, God help me. Yeah, some of the speaker crushing aspects to this album I'm still not a huge fan of. Obviously, like the just crunched out distortion, but the lyrics and the overall kind of swag of Water here, it's catchy. I don't know. I found myself kind of pulled into it. The lyrics are pretty god awful. It's a lot of the kind of, I know he's probably not a teenager at this point, but it kind of feels like the teenage I fucked everything bravado, which again, if you're 18 is pretty awesome, but at a certain point it just is whatever. And it's actually something we'll be coming back to when we talk about the next album. But that's just part of the rap genre too, so I'm not going to pretend like I'm shocked or put off by it. Yeah, let's just talk about the music, because we'll start with the 6th track here, because I feel like this is the one where, like 2, 3, some of these other ones up here, I started to get it, but this is the track where it was kind of like, okay, there is something going on with this record. I get it. And he has a lot of pretty good punches. I hear the distortion feels warranted with just like that scream he's doing. This is the track where it's like, there is a method to the madness, I guess is what it made me realize.
Я мог бы не пробовать новое, от того, что старое уже не так вставлять. Мог бы не врать о том, где ночами пропадать. Мог бы сказать правду судье и сдать сразу всех наш. Мог бы не ждать, когда уже поздно сразу греха, блять. Мог бы не трогать родителей оба. Мог бы
I mean, there are a lot of tracks on this album that I still, when I listen to them, it still feels a little, not cringe, but it's just one of those things where I realize that in the future he's probably gonna be like,
то, что тебя привлекает сильнее. Бэйби, тебе так идет твой новый образ, ой, Жан-Поль Готье. Я видел твоего бывшего, ой, жаль он в говне. Ты как на альбоме Щитолкинга, хит и поп-трек. Ты как богиня, ведь молюсь не за тебя, а тебе. Ты как я люблю курить где угодно, создавать шум. Я люблю сливать суши красиво, не имея чувств.
so even though, like I said, there are some tracks here which I'm like, not a huge fan of for various reasons. I think this is one of them. Like, this is definitely, yeah. Mainly that's because of the lyric end of things, where, but you can, yeah, like, I'm not a big fan of the sort of bad lyrics, shouted lyrics, and then like this type of beat. So these types of tracks on this album, they just don't do it for me. Like, I get it, like that's kind of the new wave to some degree, and it's not the new wave, but like that is a sound that exists in modern day hip hop or rap. So there's no avoiding it. Can't pretend it doesn't exist. But again, like, when you have it on the same album as tracks like this, I don't know, it just, it sticks out a little bit more. So, if you don't speak Russian, then the lyrical aspect's probably not going to be a deal breaker for you. And even if you do speak Russian, you don't really pay too much attention to what he's saying all the time, then you probably just be playing some hip-hop, right? For the wordplay, for the most part. So yeah, I think this is, like, I kind of get the hype around Heronwater. And it's one of those things that in the future, I will be very interested to see how much, if at all, he matures lyrically, at least in terms of the production end of things, because I'm pretty sure he does all of this, the like putting everything together, maybe not the mastering, but I will be interested to see lyrically how he grows, because as a producer, if I'm not mistaken, I feel like he's got a pretty good grasp on things too. I still love it. Overall sound of this one. Anyway, a slightly different album in the rap end of things, in terms of ones that I guess recommend, that I think are pretty good, but I was a little bit surprised that I found myself enjoying it as much as I did, and when I went through it a second time, aside from, like I said, aside from a few tracks that just don't do it for me, but that's okay, because there are 18 of them, so even if I don't like, say, 5 or 6, there's still a pretty solid core, and it feels like he's just experimenting. So that is the album 1000 Bars by the artist Heronwater. And we come to the final two, and these are the biggest ones, and God help me, because these are the ones that are going to, in some sense, take the most time. I'm going to try to get through them. Slava КПСС. ОТТЕНКИ БАРДА 2. Or Shades of the Bard. Or the Bard isn't a musician, right? Shades of the Bard 2. Slava КПСС, or I don't know. praise to the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, if you were to translate it. Slava is probably one of the tops in the Russian rap game, for the good reason, right? His wordplay is deep, and it's just incredibly educated. I'm not gonna say Oxy fell off, but Oxymoron has his share of scandals recently, but when I first kind of started paying attention to psychedelic dancehall vibes to Heronwater, I can see that too. That's pretty cool. When I first started kind of getting into Russian rap, it was through Oxymoron, and just seeing all of the references in it. And that's Slava КПСС kind of in a nutshell. If you go through any of his tracks on Genius and you go through the lyrics, it's one of those things where you'll find references to modern Russian pop culture. You'll find internet memes, figures from American society of the 20th century, references to books from the Victorian era, like ancient Middle Eastern philosophers. Just like this, it's like a Wikipedia rabbit hole of references that Slava is dropping in a single track, not over the course of the album, like sometimes in a single track, just like how the ping, 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 ping. And his output on top of the density of his lyricism it's prolific, right? On Spotify, this mixtape, because this is not an album, this is a mixtape, this is his 23rd or 24th release since 2014. So it's been 11 years and he's put out basically 2 albums a year, effectively. Many of those albums are over 30 tracks long. One of them is over 100, Anti-Hype. Plus he has 6 EPs, and he's just got a steady stream of singles that he drips out, typically when he's doing something with other artists. He also releases music under pseudonyms. So this is a guy who's just constantly churning stuff out. And oftentimes that would be a signal that there's probably some garbage. Some of the stuff he does under pseudonyms are kind of goofy one-off projects, and it feels like that's where he gets all of the garbage out of his system. But the fact remains, he's just at this non-stop. With this release, this mixtape, he said he wanted to do something like a Lil Wayne mixtape crossed with, I don't remember the other rapper, he mentioned another rapper, somebody who was a little bit more experimental with sound design. I think he achieved it. The first 2/3 of this are traditional rap tracks for the most part, lyrically focused on being more of a grown-up, because Slava is in his 30s now, and there are tracks here where he looks back on some of the things he used to rap about when he was younger, and he kind of shakes his head at that and is not necessarily embarrassed, but maybe giving a note to younger artists who are maybe doing the same thing that he did. But then, there are just other tracks too, focused on, obviously some things focused on relationships, but also just sort of adult life as well in there too. The last third of this, as you can see, my favorited songs fall off a little bit. There's a stretch here and there where fall off a little bit in the last third, but that is because it does get to be a little bit more experimental. There's tracks like Cambodia, which I couldn't help but feel was maybe a reference to the Dead Kennedys, especially in the overall sound of that track. And there's the old Photograph song reminds me of Goodbye Horses from Silence of the Lambs for some reason. I don't know if that's intentional either. I hope it's not, but it could be. Yeah, if anything, out of the 31 tracks, it's pretty much all solid all the way through. It does, like I said, for me personally, it drags a little bit at the end, but it is because it's more experimental, and it's because, like you said, this is a mixtape. This is a place for him to just throw out all of his whatever ideas. He actually released 2 massive albums last year already, so putting this out as well, yeah, I don't know. The thing is, even with these tracks towards the end that I'm not a big fan of, lyrically, they are still at a very, very high level, like a level that most Russian rappers could only dream of ever achieving. And yeah, I don't know. Slava КПСС is an artist who I haven't ever listened to in great depth, but I know his weight in the game from starting as a battle rapper in St. Petersburg, where he's from, and then I think he's from there originally. Anyway, that's where he's based. And then kind of evolving into this just never-ending flow of output. But it's good. So let me just shut up and play some of it.
Эй, твой рэп факт я не вымысел. Сперма брата, единственное, что ты с пальца высыл. Странно, это рэп, но он пацанский, как фонк. Я облизал фломастер, а тебя оближет флом. Ты на районе, это выглядит как фотошоп. Если есть вопросы, я как будто Максим Паташов. Готов ответить только рэпом, белым мне смешно. Мужикам за 30, они по-серьезки говорят: о, кого-то ловят и дают пизды, насколько же пуста ваша жизнь, если вы тратите себя на это. Было бы стыдно жить, если б меня звали пацанским рэпом. Быдло на концертах, ёб твою, я не факаюсь с этим. Нахуй этот сеттинг, я играю на левел повыше. Меня ставят высоко, я видел на стримах тирлист. Я Цезарь, видишь мой венок, сзади путь тернист. Те крипы у трона, мы камбэкнем, ведь мы оптимист. Дота панч, тебе нормально в тусе жопа Лиза. Эй, я...
The number of Dota references across this, it's not that many, but it's more than I was expecting, I'll put it like that.
В горницу полно иголок, зараженных гепатитом. Бродим в потемках, шаря руками по опасным бритвам. Жить мы хотели, как в нигерских клипах. Стали долбоебами, что чуть не сдохли молодыми. Но мы потянем, как лебедка. Сейчас настолько высоко, нас не достанет дядя Степа. Под ноги скейт, желудки, водка.
I love the Dad is Stupid line.
Винокотека разынет шамиль, воду терека. Я Георгий Мелехов, встречу на Эльбе, рисую мельком, миксую истерику в песнях с сексом. Взял твою бу и показал, что не все упирается ей во влагалище. Есть заповедные дали, смыслы, страсти, а не Ботега Венета. Каждый кусок тут мясо, дай шинкую куплеты ветротоната. Ума палата, да только полна тараканов. Моя шестая палата, мои бары святы, все мои бары догмат. Из противоречий, как учебник Диамат. Фродо не покинет Шира, пизда мехом, как шиншилла. Наложить на себя руки, чем мне нужен этот Шива. С виду мальчик для...
So just those three tracks so far, right? And even if you don't understand the lyrics, you can at least, his ability to shift his delivery style, like the moods, still is similar from track to track, but it's still very flexible.
Скажут, они говорят нос. Ты машина, но я затащил, будто стальной трос.
I also, I'm not gonna play it right now, but the Органы убийцы is like a story track where he gets in a car crash and he has a bunch of organ transplants, but they all belong to serial killers before they put in his body, and he starts having these like visions. And it's this whole thing, but it works really well. This is... No, Korzek, we're all good. I'm still going. I still have one album left. I also want to play the track that reminds me of Goodbye Horses. If anybody is familiar with Goodbye Horses from Silence of the Lambs, does it sound a little bit like that, or is that just in my imagination? Buffalo Bill. Is that specifically... Karzek, thank you for chatting away. It's always a pleasure in this case. So even if you lyrically don't understand. Unfortunately, you're missing out on a lot. And it's one of those things where even when I had the lyrics open, like I said, there were so many references, and I was trying to read it at the same time as I was listening to it, which is also damn impossible at times because he can go quite fast, Slava can. That said, even though there are a few, kind of like with Heronwater and 1000 Bars, there are tracks that I'm not a huge fan on this. Overall, this is just like a really, really good album from start to finish. And it gets a little bit more experimental towards the end. That's fine. The fact remains that even though it's 31 tracks long, each of the tracks has its own character. It doesn't ever feel like you're just kind of getting a slightly different beat with a similar topic being wrapped about on top of it. So it stays fresh through the hour and a half runtime, which is something of an accomplishment because, as I've said multiple times so far this year, when we're living in an era where albums in terms of length are getting shorter and shorter, well, I guess think about that. When we're getting to the point where albums get shorter and shorter, it does at times feel like what in the past would have been something that we waited, right? When you used to have to go buy CDs, you wanted it to last the full length, the amount that was possible, right? Like the 70 minutes you expected. Or if there was a double disc CD, God forbid, that was like 2 hours of music, it was just like, oh, thank God. And now it feels at times like if it's longer than 40 minutes, that it's this thing which feels like a chore to sit through. Maybe it's because we consume music less and in a sitting mode and more when we're doing something else or we're going someplace, and it's more in snippets, whereas in the past it was something that you just turned on and it was playing. So for this album, ОТТЕНКИ БАРДА 2, to be able to hold the listener's attention and entertain them for 90 minutes is like a resounding success. And I think it's a great album, mixtape, whatever Slava КПСС wants to call it. It's a fantastic album. I think it's like fantastic release, I guess is what we'll say. And a pretty good introduction for people who are maybe less familiar with the artist. I don't know. But it's not the final album we're going to talk about. It was a tough call. And while I think this is a really good release, I think there's the next album, the final album, is the one that's my top pick of the week. It's also probably the most contentious. We got to talk about Хаски with his album Partizan. Now, this is Haski's first release in over 5 years. I think it's been in 5 years. And this is going to be album of the year for some people. There's no doubt about that. And yeah, I don't know if it was quite what I was expecting. I've also seen other people who were not disappointed, but just sort of unsure about it. It is a statement from an artist who clearly only puts things out when he's ready or when he wants to. This is a hodgepodge of musical ideas. It honestly feels like it could have been broken into 3 or 4 EPs, which makes sense because Haski himself has even talked about how there's like 3 or 4 sections across the album. I saw people compare it to JPEG Mafia or Danny Brown in that sort of oddball rapper type of thing. And I think that's fair on some levels, but Husky's a lot more complicated than them, especially from the political end of things. And that's where this whole album, so much of the discussion with regards to Partizan online has been connected specifically to Husky's politics. And even the album artwork is a source of discussion for various reasons. We'll talk about some of that as much as I can. I don't want to be here for hours. I'm sure there are people on YouTube who are going to be doing like hour-long breakdowns of just this album and all of the stuff connected to it. But all of the beats on this album are composed by Husky under the alias of DJ Host, In the run-up to this album, there were interviews released with Haski and DJ Host. Husky and DJ Host. Host is the Russian word for tail. So Husky and the tail, does the tail wag the dog type of thing. Also, the interviewer was Husky himself, so he did... A lot of people look at this like a big ego trip, and I think that's totally fair. I think there is something to be said for that, and I think that's fair. I mean, like, people don't go into art oftentimes for completely selfless reasons. There is always a bit of an ego trip to be had there, and I do think that Husky over the last few years has developed something of a very loyal cult following. I don't know, he's not mainstream, but he's an interesting artist in that regard. But let's talk about the music and some things connected to that first. One of the reasons I think people love Husky so much is his lyricism, his texts. And they are dense. They're full of metaphors. His delivery is also not something that everyone is going to enjoy, but I do feel like it kind of works with overall what he's going for. Texts are dense and full of metaphors, but in a different way from Slava КПСС. This is lighter and more poetic in terms of looking at it and reading it without the music. As a non-native speaker, I see things in the text and realize that there are layers that I'm still not getting. I'm not going to compare him to Pushkin. I mean, that's not what I'm doing. But what I'm saying is, like, if I look at Pushkin and I read him, I get what's being said, but the wordplay sometimes doesn't strike perhaps the same way that it would to a native speaker, right? Let's listen to a little bit of the music, and then we'll talk a little bit more about this, because a lot of these songs came out as singles. 1, 2, 3, like 5 of them at least came out before the album was released as singles.
Танцы на снегу, разбивая в кашу рот. Вы считали мои зубы, я скулил как кашелот. Но я ищу опоры, я встаю, перекрестись, и я иду. На ощупь этот воздух гусь, как грязь, ныряю в смерть.
Right, like that delivery. It's gonna be a pass for some people.
Сквозь разбитую губу из последних сил креплю, не подходи, убью. Танцы на снегу, один на толпу, понимаешь, сейчас умру. Поле я лишь рэп, ты боль и король. Я объявляю вам войну, я сам не знаю почему. Мне нужен бас, чтобы оглохнуть и не слышать вас. Я лишь хочу, чтобы вы задохнулись газами. Вот как звукозаписи, флексе под звуки задницы. Я лишь хочу, чтобы все ваши поклонники с трусами на башке перепрыгнули подоконники. Мы росли как плесень на мокром. Неудачное время быть терком. Почернели забытые села. Захрустели шприцы под ногами. Это серое знамя исхода.
This track right here is where this is one of the, not linchpins, but one of the key issues that it's an axis, I guess, of debate. With Orkom, if I'm not mistaken,
Ветер взвыл, по квартиркам кургузы. Теперь орков стравили друг с
Yes,
другом.
is to be an orc.
Черным творогом. И навзрыд плачет торочка в черном. Это горькое счастье быть орком.
Не прячься.
And
Я должна тебя увидеть.
Как разбитый
if we talk a little bit about why his album is as contentious as it is, it has to do with Husky's political views or lack of clear delineation as to his political views. The song "To Be an Orc," for those of you who are less familiar, in the war that Russia is currently waging against Ukraine, the general insult, I guess, that one of the insults leveled against Russians is from the Ukrainian side is that they are orcs, right? Like a reference to Lord of the Rings, that sort of, I don't know, the army of subhuman creatures that sort of goes out. And the song "To Be an Orc" is written from the point of view of an orc. It's literally about being an orc, but it also is one of those things where it feels like it's very metaphorical. And I spent a lot of time, like Limon Katu is I think throughout this whole album, and I don't know if this is done intentionally to avoid censors, to appeal to more people, or just because Husky himself doesn't fully know where he stands at this point in time. In the early days of this whole fucking fiasco back in 2014, Husky very openly supported the sort of separatist movements in Donbass, and he has gone there and he has taken he's done humanitarian aid. I think he's done concerts and stuff there, but he's also kind of, it seems to be the focus is more on the people who live there and less about the soldiers, although there is plenty of sort of support for the soldiers. And so it's so much of the discussion around this album has boiled down to, because a lot of the lines, if you look at the text in the lyrics, a lot of the lines feel anti-war. But at the same time, they feel so generalized that it's more of a just war in general is bad. And I think it's one of those situations where some people are not okay with that, in the sense of part of his other stances. Husky has also, like, in the past released, there was a song he did, and he's been very closely connected to Prilepin, who is like a Kremlin figure, and very pro-war and stuff like that. There was a music video with Husky in it where they effectively were like, I didn't fully understand the context of it, but like they're kidnapping people out of the woods. But then there are tracks of his where it feels like he is openly anti-Putin. If I'm not mistaken, there is a track of his where he is violated by the leader of the country physically in a very explicit way. But, and I don't know if this is like his thing. All of this is done in a way where it feels like it can be interpreted both ways depending on how you want to view the individual. And like, that's fair. That's fair, right? Artists don't necessarily want to be pigeonholed into a certain thing. But for better or worse, in 2025, it's a very it's just like you kind of have to choose a side in some situations, or at least try to clarify where you stand, especially if you're making an album that specifically addresses such a heavy topic. And I think trying to straddle that middle ground is where there's been so much discussion about this album. Musically, it's a great album. It's a very interesting album. It's an album that, again, at first listen feels very, not abrasive, but like it's trying to push you away a little bit. That's kind of Husky's thing. Like he just makes the sound and the music that he wants. But it is one of those where, because it's so odd, because it's so unusual, it does warrant repeated listens. And when you come back to it, it actually does, like you start to get it, which is often the case with pieces of art. But the situation by and large with this album, and I don't know how in the long term it will, I mean, musically it will hold up, and obviously for fans of Husky, they're going to love this still. But it does feel like one of those things where, because of just the current political situation in 2025 in the world at large, especially in Russia, because of the themes that he is kind of, sort of, maybe kind of addressing, and because he tries to be threading the needle, it seems to me, maybe I misinterpreted the lyrics, so that's totally open. That's totally a possibility too. It feels like this is going to be a very divisive record, which as an artist is also probably not a bad thing. People are going to be talking about it. People who have never listened to Husky before are going to be listening to Husky to find out what all the fuss is about. People who support the war, for example, and who didn't listen to Husky before are maybe going to hear something about it and go check him out. People who are against it, or maybe it's going to be a magnet. If it's a magnet for discussion, it's a magnet for ears, and people are going to want to make their own opinions about it. It's just always how it is. So it's unfortunate that this all is yeah, I mean, it is one of those things. I don't know if I would fully agree with, like, I mean, yes, more liberal-minded Russians might feel maybe feel like the West is against them. I think it's more one of those things where I don't know. All of the people I know who have been abroad in the last few years have not had any negative comments. I think it's just more people who haven't been abroad in a while are starting to feel that. But that's always the case, right? When you don't have any interactions with people abroad, you assume that, like, the worst case scenario. And I think with Husky, it also, I feel like Husky just in general, he's a very political person, but I don't think he has like a clear political stance on anything. He's the uncle at Thanksgiving who gets super belligerent about politics, but doesn't have a fucking clue about any actual stances or any policies that are actually worth a damn. He just doesn't like shit because this is good or this is bad. I don't want to say that's like I don't know. Maybe that's not, but that's how it feels. It feels like Husky's politics is just a kind of, it's a lot of generalizations. He's, the flag here, this album artwork is a reference perhaps to the what's the Natsbull, what the hell is the name of the party? Edward Limon, right? What the hell was the name of his? Edward Limonov. What was his political party? It was like Natsbull, right? Yeah, the National Bolshevik Party, right? This is basically what the Natsbull flag looked like. I realize I'm looking at the, but this is also what the, I guess I can just go over here real fast. Let me. Right. Like the National Bolsheviks flag, which was the party of Limonov, which was like a pretty nationalistic communist group. There's definitely that. However, this is also very reminiscent of, like, what's the, I can't think, like, my brain is just fried right now. Like Pobyedonosets or something like that. What's the, I can't think right now. I've been doing this too long. Yes. I don't know what the hell this is called. There's a specific name for it. Like with the, especially with the letters in the thing. So it is, his album artwork is a combination of the National Bolshevik flag and the imperial sort of military, like it's, when I say it's a hodgepodge of political ideas, this is what I'm talking about. And so in that regard, I feel like trying to read too much into Husky's politics is probably not worth your time, because it kind of feels like, at least, again, I haven't taken the time and I really don't give a shit to dig into his overall political ideologies, because just looking at this mix, it feels like he's either trolling, which, hey, if that's the case, good for him, or that it's just, like I said, this weird mishmash hodgepodge of shit that I read and heard when I was an edgy teenager, and then as I got to be an adult, I never really sat down to, I don't know, look into them with any depth, and just accepted the information that I had absorbed passively as a teenager, and I've just accepted that as my core belief system, right? That's kind of what it feels like. So it's either one of those two extremes. Either way, if it's trolling, then it's not worth arguing about, because he's knowingly inciting this. If it is the second option, and it's just like he himself doesn't have a very clear understanding of what he believes in, other than the fact that he believes in something, then that's also just kind of like, okay, why are we discussing the politics of like whoever? I mean, obviously he is an artist and he does have some say on stuff, but the politics are going to be the main thing that people get hung up with this album. And I if somebody wants to go into more depth in the comments after this, if people are watching this after this is done being a live video and is in the live section, like, please lay it out there. I'm not going to go hunt it down myself. And it's just, it's one of those things. It's just not worth my time. Musically, we'll just talk about this music, because again, I'm hoping that a lot of the people watching aren't Russian, or if they are, I don't, anyway, I'm hoping that this is, going out to a broad audience, I guess is what we'll say. And in that case, then, yeah, if you like things that are a little bit more experimental, music-wise, then give it a shot. Musically, it's a good album. I just think that, for better or worse, this is probably going to be the most divisive album of the year, but not for musical reasons. For the political reasons and the ambiguity around them, which the artist himself kind of allows to exist. So feel about that how you will. That's just kind of the situation. So anyway, that is it. So yeah, kind of the top album of the week, for better or worse, is Partizan by the artist Haski. And how long have I been doing this? Jesus Christ. Yeah, I actually thought this was going to be kind of short this week. I'm not going to lie. Mainly because I only had 12 albums, and I don't know where the time went. I suppose I probably spent a little bit more time on some of the tracks than I initially intended. That happens quite a bit more often than I would care to. But that's okay. I honestly, we've got what? 1, 2, 3. We have 3 weeks left. 3 weeks of releases, and I kind of hope that that this next week is the last week of like a massive week of new releases. There are a few albums left over from November. I do want to actually talk about OG Buddha. I do actually want to give that one a shot. And I do want in December, hoping that the things slow down, I do want to actually go back and have a little bit of a discussion about a little bit of a review of, I did the first quarter review. I did a video on that. It took way too long. So I would like to just do a stream where I review sort of top picks of the second quarter, the third quarter, and then the fourth quarter when it finally does wrap up. I think that'll be the way to do it. And then from there, I guess it's possible to do like a top of the year across all 4 quarters. But anyway, I am completely dead. It is midnight here. And I don't know, I'm a sleepy Sally. So I'm going to wrap it up. I will be back. I'll be back on Sunday at 9 p.m. to do the news. And Wednesday at 9 p.m. Moscow time to do the news. With regard to music, well, I'll be back next Thursday at 10 p.m. as well. I think, I mean, to be fair, the last 2 albums, there was a decent amount to discuss, specifically Husky's release. And I think that's important. Like, it's one of those things where part of the reason I do this, I mean, I do like the music, but I do think it's important to, art obviously does not exist in a vacuum. And when there are these little pieces of information, it's like, it's those little insights that you don't get if you live in the States and there is something connected to an artist, you know all of the context around it, right? Or you quickly find it out. And it's one of those things where you just kind of get it. And you don't have to understand this or that. But if you're looking at another country, kind of, I guess it's like the reverse scenario where you can look at the scandals and things around artists or statements that they try to make or little feuds, and you can use that as a window into things that are happening within parts of the society as a whole. So anyway, I was wrapping this up. What am I doing here? Everyone have a good evening, good afternoon, whatever time of the day it is. I will, well, take care of yourselves. I say that next, and then I say, I will see you when I see you. Until then,